Those pictures behind you, Dante, you've got them from Africa?
Actually, I got them from Haiti.
Oh, Haiti. Oh, okay. Okay.
Right.
Okay. I was in Haiti about a year and a half ago.
Oh,
We went down, my wife and I and a few others went there, and we went to the other side of the island as well and saw where the people who have resources live, and then we saw where the poor people live.
right. I mean, it's a very separate island from the Dominican Republican side to the
Yep.
Haitian side. It's just
Absolutely.
two different places.
Yep, yep. You never know you were in the same place.
No.
But that was kind of like the place I grew up in Georgia. In Georgia, where I grew up, one side of town across the railroad tracks was where the people of color lived, and they were only African Americans, and the whites lived on the other side.
Yeah. No, the cross the tracks is a real thing.
It was real. That train track's still there, although the train hadn't run in probably 40 years.
Right.
Its tracks are still there.
Yep. Redlining was a real thing. And segregation.
Yeah. I grew up with all of that in Georgia till I finished high school, and then went to Tuskegee after that.
Oh, okay. Right. Well, my father's family is in Little Rock, so I used to go to Little Rock every summer. My grandmother's backyard was next to the Black High School in Little Rock before they integrated Little Rock Central.
Oh, wow. My wife is from Pine Bluff, Arkansas.
Oh, yeah. I've got a couple of cousins down there right now.
Yeah. So you're gonna let me know, Cindy, when we've got a quorum, right?
Yes, you do have a quorum now. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Good afternoon to everybody. My name is France Davis. I'll be presiding for tonight's Racial Equity and Policing Commission's meeting. Thank you all for joining us, and I'll be conducting the meeting, and I'll turn it over to the Langdon Group afterwards. Tonight is a night that we set aside for public hearings to hear what those of you in the public wish to contribute to our commission's work. I want to let all of you know, and anybody else who would be interested, that you can participate by calling, and I'm going to give you a phone number, an 800 number, calling 1-800-876-7516, 1-800-876-7516. And you can call that number and then enter the queue. We will be limiting the public comment period, and it will be conducted with the assistance of our facilitators, who is the Langdon Group. Before we get there, however, there are minutes of previous meeting. Are those available, Cindy?
We do not have any minutes to report at this time.
No minutes to report. So we'll go ahead with the meeting. I'll now turn the remainder of the meeting and the time over to the Langdon Group. Dante and his team are here, and this evening they will walk us through our various items on the agenda. Dante?
Thank you, Reverend Davis. Thank you, Reverend Davis. Much appreciated, and good evening to all the commissioners. Always a pleasure to be here and sharing this work with you. My colleagues are here with me. Larry Schooler, Josh King is here, and is Siobhan here? Siobhan just is here as well. So we're here and ready to keep going. And So as you've seen the agenda outlined, we'll just start with the public comment, move through kind of an overview from us on some of the one-on-one conversations that we've had, just to give you some feedback on what we've heard. Talk about the subcommittees, hear from probably the youth subcommittee, and then get into a conversation around how the one position will be filled from the one person who resigned, had to leave the commission. Then we'll get into talking about the listening sessions and your thoughts on locations of the things that Larry will kind of lead us in. So again, thank you for your time and attention this day. And I'll turn it over to Larry to get us right into any public comment.
Thank you very much, Dante. Just to reiterate for those listening who would like to give comment to the commission, you can call a toll-free number, and that toll-free number again is 800-876-7516. That's 800-876-7516. And I'm personally monitoring that line. And so if you see my picture disappear from the screen, it's because I'm answering the line and trying to get a citizen into the meeting. As Dante said, as Reverend Davis also said, we've got 15 minutes available tonight for public comment, with about 1 to 2 minutes per person. And there are public meeting guidelines in terms of comments that you can find in the agenda. Perhaps, Dante, should I read those out for the public's benefit, or should we? I guess
I'm also available to read them out, Larry, if you'd like.
Oh, okay. Yeah, go ahead, Cindy Lou.
Yeah, we just like, of course, we just like to make sure that the standard is set, that comments are free of discriminatory language that refer to a person or group based on religion, ethnicity, nationality, race, color, descent, gender, sexual orientation, disability, age, or other gender identity factors. Items or comments that disrupt the meeting, intimidate other participants, or that may cause safety concerns are not allowed. Following these guidelines will increase the civility in the room and permit the commissioners to receive comments from all perspectives. Thank you.
Dante, at this time, there's nobody who's called in to speak, but I'll be sure to update you as the meeting progresses if we get callers in.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. So I would suggest that we can move into agenda item number 3, kind of our overview of the feedback from the one-on-one sessions until there's another call. And Larry, you can let us know when the first caller comes in. So why don't we, I was going to call on you, Larry, first. So why don't we go to Siobhan while you monitor the phone calls.
What are we going to me for, Dante? Sorry, I missed that part. I was trying to get the phone number up for everybody to be able to see. Go ahead.
Your feedback on the one-on-one sessions that
yes.
in?
I think my overall takeaways on the calls is that people are generally glad to have facilitators and generally glad to see that we appear to be moving towards what everybody really wants to get into, which is the meat of this discussion, and the establishment of the subcommittees and some other points of order have really been a welcome, or generally been a very welcome thing. I think we also got a few key pieces of other people we need to talk to and other processes that are underway that I think will be useful to us as we're gathering data and as we're trying to dig into these issues. So those were my 2 main takeaways. Certainly there were a lot more for the individuals, and getting to know each person that I talked to was extremely valuable to know how each of you are coming to this work. So that is extremely valuable, but of course unique to each participant.
Thank you, Siobhan. And what I'd like to do just for process is go through each of us and our thoughts, and then open it up for questions from the commission as we do that. So Josh, you want to go next?
Yeah, thanks, Don. It was my opportunity to interview 10, 12 of you, and I appreciate the time. For the most part, almost everybody has lived in the area for quite a long time and is vested in the community and active in the community, recognizes the need for change, and is ready and willing to act with urgency. There were 3 primary themes that surfaced through the interviews, process, policy, and culture were the primary themes that came out. Regarding process, again, people looking to move forward and have a bias towards action and really get things going. Looking forward to us being able to help and to get into subcommittees and start formulating recommendations. Also in regards to process, desire to get buy-in and engage the full community and engage and involve law enforcement in different capacities. Policy, the second theme, people are looking to really look and dive into the policies and tweak where necessary and look at how those policies are creating the outcomes and go to the root of those policies to effectuate change. And then finally, culture, really looking for accountability, responsibility, and trust in law enforcement and building a relationship of trust and a relationship of trust that looks at the greater good for the community to make it more equitable and peaceful for everybody.
Thank you, Josh. I'll go next while Larry's still waiting. So just some general comments overall. Similarly, the desire for concrete results to fuel success in helping communities of color feel safe and protected. A desire for recommendations that create more police accountability. A need to recognize and consider the refugee and immigrant populations in Salt Lake City and how they are impacted. Ensure that we're addressing the recommendations of the 3 large focus areas, police budget, police policies, and police culture. There's a desire to want police to understand the fear and the mistrust that exist in communities of color. Desire to influence structural change in policing, and desire to address and shift police culture through training. All the commissioners I spoke to, I think as Josh said, wanted some level of police officer involvement on the commission, not necessarily as a voting member, but as an engaged listener who can offer thoughts or feedback on discussions from a current Salt Lake City police officer perspective. The need to address Salt Lake City PD diversity through recommendations on hiring processes, lateral transfer processes, and promotions. And then finally, the desire to do what is best for Salt Lake City, not specifically follow some other city's model or approach to doing it, but really utilize the community's approach from Salt Lake City, because Salt Lake City is Salt Lake City and has its own unique communities and ways of doing things. And so using that as the model, not somebody else's model. Larry, any calls yet?
No, sir. I feel a little like a radio talk show host. We don't have any calls at the moment, but
Okay.
I just wanted to briefly say that in addition to hearing everything that I heard from the 3 colleagues, you know, I heard some incredible stories, and I say incredible somewhat deliberately in the sense that some of the experiences that the commissioners shared that either had directly impacted them individually or family members or friends were incredible to me. And I want to kind of pose as a question to the commission, something to consider, and that is that as we're listening to the community and hearing about some of their experiences and hearing their suggestions, I just wonder a little bit about how much the commission has had the opportunity to hear one another's stories. And so while the emphasis is clearly on action and reform and determining, you know, concrete ways for the Salt Lake City Police Department to improve, I think it would be interesting to see if there's some way to create some space for those stories to be shared just among you all, because they are quite powerful, at least to me. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. And that's an absolute great point, that the many personal stories we heard, they're certainly not ours to tell, but the personal stories we heard are the reason many of you are here, and they are very powerful. And to that end, many of you don't really know each other. And so we have been kind of brainstorming thinking about how we can facilitate that session where you all really just get to know each other better. certainly as you get into small group sessions, there's a better opportunity because they're smaller groups. But still, how do we really facilitate you knowing each other better? And so we'll be having that conversation as we move forward as well. So if there's no callers in there, you can just interrupt as somebody calls in. Wanted to move into the idea of the subcommittees and the subcommittee reports.
Before you leave that, Dante, can I ask the,
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to open up for questions. I'm sorry. Thank you, Reverend.
my question is, did you hear anything about celebrating what the department is already doing and how that could be achieved?
I did. From a couple of the commissioners said that, you know, how do we help the police and how do we help the community see the good things that the police department is doing? And, you know, I always tell most police departments, you guys are not really good at telling your own story about what you do well. Because most cops will just say, it's just what I do. I don't need to tell it. So how do we help tell that story or help communities hear that story was in fact something that I heard from several of the commissioners.
I heard a little bit on the other side of that equation, Dante. There were commissioners who felt that they weren't quite ready to go there yet, that they weren't quite ready to, they felt like there was some version of being an apologist in there that they weren't necessarily comfortable with just yet. So I think there's a couple different perspectives on how we're going to approach that amongst commissioners.
No doubt. Thank you. Any other thoughts or questions on?
Yeah, I'll just add to that, Dante. There was several comments on Chief Brown and under his leadership, some changes. There is some uncertainty whether that's trickling down to the rank and file. And then I'll just add onto what Larry was saying about experiences and stories. They were impactful, and it was interesting to see many of you had stories where you were profiled or unlawfully treated, and it wasn't until law enforcement recognized who you were or what the relationship was with somebody that they acted differently. And so that just underscores the importance of relationship and building relationships and knowing these stories and telling these stories.
Thank you. Other thoughts, questions? Did we misstate anything that some of you think you may have said?
I'd like to say what kind of Reverend said, that again, I think we do have to also see the positives. It's not all negative, because then we start dehumanizing each other. On the other hand, I also have to respect the experiences of some folks that if you're not ready to go there, that's totally understandable. But there's got to be a balance. In order to bring an institution in, we can't just be critical. We got to be, in my eyes, as I do in all of my evaluations, we got to see the goods and the bads. So I don't know how that looks, and that's why we pay the facilitators the big bucks to figure that stuff out. So thanks that you guys will be able to do that.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'll make sure you get the invoice. Other thoughts, commissioners?
I don't know that it's necessarily our role to share the stories of law enforcement, but I do think that we do need to work together with them in order to get buy-in. I don't know if any of you follow or like the Utah Highway Patrol page on Facebook. I do work with them in my other business, and right now they have this campaign to share their own stories, and they've acknowledged and recognized that that's something that they haven't done, is shared their own story. And so they're really working on it right now. They have a community outreach team. I think if we do work together with law enforcement, not as as commission members, but just as maybe an advisor or someone that we're just working with within that community, part of our job is to encourage them to share their stories, because their stories are important as well. The positive side, because all we're hearing is the negative side.
Thank you, Commissioner. Okay,
Oh, sorry.
yes.
I think that's a good idea to have the Salt Lake Police Department share their stories. I think the community would like that. They need to hear the positive. We need something positive right now in the community instead of negative.
Thank you, Commissioner. I guess maybe the underlying question is that this commission's role to assist them in doing that? Or is it just the expectation that the police department on its own should be or could be doing better in sharing its own story?
Hi, how are you? I think it's good that they're doing their own story. It's coming from them. I don't think we need to assist them. I think it's good that they are putting themselves out there on the line and they are telling their stories from their perspective. And we need to let them do what they've already started doing. I think that's a good thing that they're doing that. And I also think, we need to remember that we are here to make them accountable. That doesn't mean that we hate the police. That doesn't mean that we hate what they're trying to do to change. And we're just here to help them and make them accountable.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any final thoughts? Anybody on the line, Larry?
No, but I was just going to reiterate the number in case anybody's just joined us and wanted to make a public comment. The toll-free number is 1-800-876-7516. Again, 800-876-7516.
And if you tell them also, Larry, that we are not interested in just producing our own point of view, but we want to hear from the community. We want the community to have input. And so if anybody has any input, now is a good time to do that, and we'll schedule some time monthly. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Davis. So stepping into the next item regarding subcommittees and subcommittee reports. The last commission meeting, we agreed upon 4 specific subcommittees: the School Safety Subcommittee, Officer Recruitment Subcommittee, Training Subcommittee, and Policies and Practice Subcommittee. And thanks to you for signing up for for those committees. We're going to go kind of do a roll call to make sure that everybody is where they wanted themselves to be. Also understanding that several of you are overachievers and signed up for most of those committees. And since they overlap in time, we're going to have to ask you to make a decision, but also have the opportunity to maybe have that conversation when you get into the subcommittee to see if there's a different time, if in fact some of you would like to attend more than one subcommittee meeting. So thank you for signing up for those. And also want to ask each of you on behalf of the youth subcommittee to reach back out to those who you may have recommended to be on the youth subcommittee who have not been in attendance as often as they could be. It's my understanding, and Commissioner Powell, I offer you the opportunity to speak on it, that a significantly less than the total number of those on the Youth Commission have been attending. And so the opportunity to reach out to those who you contacted would be very helpful to see if they still want to be engaged, or do we need to replace them with some other folks who maybe have more time to do the work. Commissioner Powell.
Thank you, Dante. As many of you know, the youth subcommittee meets on a bi-weekly basis So currently we've had about up to 5 out of 11 participate. We just want to make sure when we're distributing the workload and whatnot, we're taking into account who's actively going to be carrying on that work. So I recall Coletta stating in the beginning of the email chain that this is going to be a 6-month to year-long process. And I strongly believe the 5 active participants are committed to the long haul of this work. So we're looking forward to working with you all still.
Thank you. Thank you. So what I want to do now before I give the youth subcommittee an opportunity to offer a report on its own is go through the subcommittees and the names of those who've chosen on that particular subcommittee. And I'll just start with mine that I'll be leading, which is the training subcommittee. And on that subcommittee, I have subcommittee members Mariana Suarez, Ana Pesik Ali, Davina Smith, Steve Van Jewerden, Tanya Hawkins, Verona Segado Malga, Reverend Davis, Lizaida Afamada, Desange Kwanihira, I'm sorry if I don't do well with the names, Madre Teresi, Rogelio Romero, and Moises Prospero. Is there anybody whose name was read who doesn't think they were supposed to be on there? Or is anybody whose name was not read wants to be on the training subcommittee? Okay, it is scheduled to meet every Wednesday from 5 to 6:30. I just put it for 90 minutes just in case, because we know what happens when we get into a deep discussion around particular issues. So I wanted to at least have the space so that we have the opportunity to do that.
Currently scheduled for every other Wednesday, correct? Currently?
Yes, is that not what I said?
You said every. I just wanted to make.
Thank you. Every other, and the first subcommittee meetings will begin next Wednesday, the 28th. Okay. Let's see, Larry, you want to go with the officer recruitment subcommittee?
Yeah, actually, do you have the list in front of you, Dante? Because I don't currently.
I do. Darlene McDonald, Verona Segado Malga, Steve Van Jewerden, Davina Smith, Desange Kwanihira, and Lizaida Afamada. And Steve, Desange, and Lizaida are also signed up for other committees, just so to be clear. Anything wrong with those names there? Anybody missing or want to be in that?
And I think we're scheduled to meet at 4 o'clock on alternate Wednesdays.
Starting at 4 o'clock on the 28th. Thank you. Let's see. The school safety subcommittee is going to be lead facilitator Siobhan, and I'll read those names for that subcommittee. Davina Smith, which I think I read her name once before. Maybe not. Davina Smith, Luna Banuri, Kamal Ahmad, Ana Pesik Ali, Moises Prospero, I know I've read that name before. Samantha Eldridge, Steve Van Jewerden, I've read that name before. Nicole Salazar Hall, MJ Powell, Aran Afalava, and Madre Tedeschi. And I think I read that name earlier too.
We too are scheduled on the alternate Wednesdays at 4 to 5. So that is one of the ones that overlaps with others. So if you are signed up for 2, maybe for at least for the first week, make your choice. And then we can talk about, if it's truly important to the groups that they be able to participate in multiple, we can look at alternate times, but let's meet first and then talk about that. So.
Great, thank you. The last subcommittee is policies and practices that Josh will be the lead facilitator. Josh, you want me to read?
Yeah, go ahead, Dante. You're doing a great job.
Okay. Luna Banuri, which I know I read their name. Steve Johnson, Velosa Solovi, Steve Van Jewerden for the 4th time maybe. Carol Shiflett, Samantha Eldridge, Darlene McDonald, Lizaida Afamada, Ephraim Kum, MJ Powell, Desange Kwanihira, and Alemalolwa Tokotaha. I'm sorry, I'm not doing so well with those names. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those names also were read previously. Luna, Steve, Lazada, MJ, Basange, were also ready with another committee. So Josh, comments or thoughts?
No, I'll just reiterate what Siobhan said. Is if people want to serve on multiple committees, we can look at different times or some alternatives.
Okay. Is there anybody whose name I did not read that has the availability to participate in the subcommittee? Okay.
Can you confirm youth subcommittee member Ephraim Coombe for the policies and practice?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Okay. So again, they will be meeting next week for the first time. The training will meet at 5 to 6:30 and the other 3 will meet from 4 to 5. You'll be getting a link to those meetings sometime this week so that you'll have all the information that you should be able to just get into the link and attend. The expectation is that they will be open to the public. Public will be able to view, not engage and have comment opportunities, but at least it will be posted so that they will be able to view the subcommittee meetings. Okay. Langdon Group, any final thoughts on the subcommittees before I give the youth committee an opportunity?
I'll just say that, I'm certainly excited to be assisting the subcommittee that I'm assigned to, and I don't think that the 4 of us have any sort of preconceived notion about, the role that we're going to play there. We can facilitate the way we are facilitating on behalf of the full commission, and we can assist in other ways, just in terms of the comfort level of the subcommittee. So use us as is most helpful, I would say. So that's all.
Thank you. And I would suggest that the real meat of the work will be done in subcommittees to then bring the work back to the larger commission for a decision. So the subcommittee reports aren't a long detail of everything that you talked about, but maybe just highlights of what specific policies or budgetary issues or training components that are being discussed, with the expectation that in the future, recommendations on those particular points will be brought back to the larger commission with recommendations for decision by this full commission to then formulate those recommendations to pass on along to council and to the mayor. So I hope that helps kind of explain kind of how we're seeing this work. Any thoughts or questions or concerns about process, Commissioner Jordan?
Not so much process as probably the most flagrant violator for signing up for every committee possible. And I also signed up for 2 additional ones that don't exist. So just so you know, I outdid myself. I was mostly just trying to show my enthusiasm to participate where you all needed me. So if there were gaps, I'd be happy to fill those areas. So did we narrow down the process to reduce the number of the subcommittees that people are in? Were we going to look at that next Wednesday, or was that something we're going to discuss today?
The number of subcommittees?
Not the number of subcommittees, but many of us are in multiple competing subcommittees. So did we have a process for resolving that?
I think what we at least suggested is that pick one to attend the next Wednesday.
Got it.
And that way you can evaluate exactly what your role in that one could be, or do you think you might be better served by participating in another one?
And we could leave open the possibility that if enough people feel strongly, we could shift times to accommodate, but let's see within the subcommittees what the will behind that is.
Right. Yeah, I think that makes good sense. Thanks for the clarification.
Yes, sir. Okay. So there we go. So Commissioner Powell, would you like to at least designate who's going to offer a report on the youth subcommittee?
I believe I'm the only youth commissioner here at the moment. I think Mahir may have had a something come up in her schedule, but luckily nothing needs to be voted on. I'll just go ahead and talk about what we spoke with the Langdon group on Saturday. So some concerns of the youth subcommittee currently was the participation first and foremost. So if you could go ahead and reach out to your respective youth subcommittee invitees and see if they're still interested in participating. We'd appreciate that clarification. Additionally, we went ahead and discussed the frequency of our meetings and the ability to give the youth the opportunity to present their reports in the meetings. So youth subcommittee member Ephraim Coombe mentioned, I think 2 or 3 meetings ago, the youth subcommittee presented policy concerns and which were never really included in the overall commission meeting notes and weren't addressed in the following meeting. So although that was a small concern of ours, it was noted, and we would just like to make sure that we're included in commission meeting notes. And additionally, we would like to address the moving process currently. I, as a political science major, understand policy work takes time to work through, but ultimately, we're not only affecting policy change, we're also hoping to affect culture change. And we've seen in the press and the media recently that there is an ongoing need to address reform within SLCPD from the youth subcommittee perspective. So we are asking that we are mindful of the time it takes to move these processes. Additionally, the direct concerns we've had that are still prevalent and important right now is police immunity, protection by the courts, also known as qualified immunity. We'd like to see that addressed ultimately immediately within the policies and practice subcommittee. We'd also would like to address the gray area in many of the policies and procedures stated within the SLCPD manual. So we would appreciate having a legal representative there to define terms such as reasonable force, suspicion, etc. And lastly, our advice from the Langdon group was to be ourselves and to push this envelope. So to speak on that, some subcommittee members mentioned that they feel there's a discord between some older members of the commission and some younger members of the commission, and how we're hoping to achieve this, and especially within the time manner we're hoping to achieve these issues. You know, piggybacking off of the time constraints, I think a lot of the concern was just that last meeting, there was the vote to have a monthly meeting within a commission, and ultimately it brought a lot of security to the subcommittee members that most of the older members are definitely dedicated to this, but we like to remind them that we're doing this as volunteers and as students, and we're hoping to follow your lead because many of you are the professionals. So we're ultimately just applying our experiences, and we hope that our experiences will be beneficial in any reform policy decisions in the future. And then last and not least, the goal of moving forward would be to provide recommendations. So to piggyback off of the opening point, we would like to have a law enforcement representative in these meetings so we can hear the take from a law enforcement representative about how that may affect their job and what they're doing. And we also understand, like, I know Steve Andrew Worden is here, and I appreciate his take, but maybe a representative from the department we're hoping to reform in particular would be beneficial. Thank you, and that's all I have to say today.
Thank you, Commissioner Powell. Any questions or thoughts?
Dante, one of the issues that we ought to try to settle is who's keeping records of these meetings so that we know what the issues are and we remember to bring them up again when it's time for discussion. We haven't had minutes for a while now, so we need somebody to be keeping records of what the committees report.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I see Cindy Lou unmuted. Did you want to speak to that?
I just wanted to let you know, thank you, Reverend Davis, for keeping us right here and in charge with meeting minutes. This is an item of discussion that we're working on with the facilitators as well. Adding the subcommittees with open meeting will put minutes there as well, which will be great to keep those records. And I regret that the minutes are as delayed as they are. I've shifted us into a new program, which will hopefully permit the minutes to be much quicker with the turnaround so that you can have the record of the meeting. And I appreciate the point that you've made. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Any thoughts or questions for Commissioner Powell?
Dante, I'd like to say something.
Sure.
Yes, when y'all brought up all those policy discussions, the youth subcommittee brought it up. We weren't prepared for it, that's for sure. We especially the depth of it. It was like, wow, these guys are really hitting it good. At the same time, oh man, we didn't set it up right. So definitely our apologies for that. And I don't think that that the commission ignored. It's just that right after that, that's when the Langdon group came in and that's when subcommittees came in. So the reason I didn't really address it right away, just so you know, MJ, is because I knew we were going to have a policy subcommittee, and that's where your meeting's going to come in. So everything you guys have, I saw you guys take notes, and so you just keep that on handy. So and I thought you guys are going to join that committee too, those subcommittees too. So you make sure you keep pushing that. So that's why I myself wasn't as concerned, but actually I should have probably expressed that more, that, hey guys, you guys are being listened to. We will have now a process to address those issues. And I'm sorry if it seemed like we were kind of like pushing you off, like, those young guns, yeah, it's nice you're saying it. That's not the case at all. We're definitely love having y'all here. And that's why it wasn't on the notes, because the notes are a little behind, and so hopefully all that will be on. So sorry that made y'all feel that way, but we have your back. And just so y'all know, also, Stephen Jewin and Mariana Suarez, both of them are retired law enforcement as well. They were with UPD, Unified Police Department, and not in Salt Lake PD. So that's a legit case too, that maybe we need somebody from the organization that we're actually looking at. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Prospero. And I think you're absolutely right that the work of the youth subcommittee will greatly inform the policies subcommittee as they step into that. If there's no other thoughts or comments for the youth subcommittee, moving to the next.
Just briefly, Dante, I'm sorry to,
please.
I'm sorry if I interrupted you, Nicole. Yeah, thanks for the kindness about my perspective. I also wanted to ensure that Lieutenant Suarez's career and experience was also acknowledged. Not to speak for other people, but I believe Commissioner Shiflett mentioned that she has had some experience in the law enforcement institution as well. Am I correct in saying that? So there's good perspective that way, but I 100% agree that representation and perspective from the agency that we are looking to provide these recommendations towards is absolutely critical. Not just on its face, but also for that relationship piece that we want to build. If we're going to work with an organization, they need to be a part of it in order to feel like they can buy into our processes. And I think that that's a critical piece. I know it's been brought up 3 times already, but I just wanted to reiterate from my point of view, the importance of the Salt Lake City Police Department involvement in the work that we're doing.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Salazar Hall, did you have something you wanted to speak to?
No, I was going to let you know that Steve had a comment, but I mean, in general, I enjoy mentoring young people. So I'm actually excited to get started on the subcommittee work so I can work directly with some of the subcommittee members.
Great, thank you. Which leads us to the next agenda item about the resignation of one commission member. There's been a kind of discussion point about how to fill that. One of the recommendations was having another youth subcommittee as a voting member added to the full commission. So that's been a suggestion. Other suggestions and/or I would suggest a motion, or at least a suggestion that we can reach consensus on, if somebody would like to offer some thoughts.
I'd like particularly the idea of having a third member of the youth committee as a part of our full committee. And that would be my recommendation.
Thank you, Commissioner Davis.
I'd like.
I'm sorry?
Said I'd like to make.
Please.
I do get excited by the idea of bringing in more youth, and I would love to support that. But I would also request to defer back to the Excel sheet we created, which clearly outlines what skill set we have available on the commission, and if there is any gap in there, and if we have any person that was shortlisted but did not make it to the full commission yet. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bernard. Other thoughts?
The other point I would make is we've talked about having a person from the agency that we are working with as a part of the commission. And so maybe this, that would be another way of looking at it too, is could we fill that slot with a Salt Lake City police officer?
That is not a bad idea, Reverend Davis. I have a little bit of hesitancy having them be a full member of the commission, only because I don't want to create a conflict with their employer. That would be my only concern. I think it would be valuable to have them present at meetings to provide perspective and to weigh their perspective and their experiences and how these policies are going to affect their ability to do their job. But I do worry about them being a full voting member because of that potential conflict. I do recall that Commissioner Guzman worked in substance use disorder and was a member of the Ute Nation, I believe. So I believe we have two members of the commission who are, I think Commissioner Eldridge is a member of the Navajo Nation. I believe Commissioner Smith is also Dene. I hope I'm not speaking out of turn for both of them. So I don't know, not to downplay or minimize the role of more Native involvement, but I think an additional youth subcommittee member may be useful to keep ideas fresh. So I would be in support of having a third youth subcommittee member join as a voting member.
Dante, could I step in for a second?
Please.
I guess I'd love for the commission, either by show of hand or some other means, to share whether you are, concerned about what I'll call an active duty Salt Lake City Police Department official serving on the commission. Because I've heard Commissioner Salazar Hall's perspective, and it feels like a lot of other folks have been saying we need to work actively with SLCPD. And so I'm trying to get a feel for where folks are sitting, whether it be by show of hand. I think that there's a conflict and I don't want a police department member to serve actively, or something else. But I think it'd be helpful to kind of understand where everybody's sitting with this.
Right. It might be important to make a distinction whether they're voting or not based on what I'm hearing so far.
Yes. So which is your question? As a voting member or as an advisory member?
Well, actually, before we ask that of everybody, let me ask Commissioner Salazar Hall. If a member of the Salt Lake City Police Department were serving in a non-voting capacity on the commission, would that change any of your reluctance for them to participate in that way?
Gotta ask the hard questions, don't you, Larry?
Well, according to Moises, that's why they're paying us. That never mind. I'm not going to finish
You
that
answer big
sentence.
So it would alleviate some of the conflict heartache that I do have, because I don't want to put an active duty officer in the position of saying, in the position of, on the one hand, having a policy they may or may not be in favor of, balancing what they're hearing from us, and also balancing their meal ticket and their career. I don't want to endanger their career. I know how difficult that can be in a public service sort of position. So I don't want to put an officer in the position of having to vote on something that could endanger their standing with their fellow officers and their department, and may also endanger their job. So that's what I want to protect that officer, and I want them to be able to participate fully. I don't want to put them in a bad position. I do want to respect that they do have a job to do, and they probably have friends, and I don't want to endanger that for them. So I think them not being a voting member would help, so that there's no way that they could, their concerns about maintaining their friendships and their position at work won't interfere with their ability to work with us. I guess that's a very poor way of me saying that, and I should have done.
No, it's not a poor way. No, it's not at all a poor. It's not at all a poor way. It's very well thought out. Let me then ask if Dante. I'm sorry to just sort of step on your feet here, so forgive me. You can take things back. I was just going to get a show of hands about the idea of a non-voting member of SLCPD. And a hand raised would mean, yes, I'm supportive of that idea of having an active duty member of the current Salt Lake City Police Department be a non-voting member of the commission.
Larry, before we do that, I would like to hear the perspective of Steve and Mariana. If you were in that position as an active person in the department, what does that look like as an active non-voting member or as an active voting member? What's the difference in y'all's perspective?
Personally, I think if I was currently employed by Salt Lake City PD right now, I would not want to be a voting member, like Nicole said. I think there would be a lot of conflict, because you would get that pressure to say what your agency wants you to believe in, even though maybe you believe in something else. So that's where I would stand on that.
Yeah, I think non-voting is the way to go. And we say one. I would still like to get a perspective from a variety of officers in different positions in the department, so that we know more. We have a better understanding of the breadth of the perspective in the department. Law enforcement agencies are not of one mind. There's policy and direction, and those things have to be, similar at the very least, for the same goals and outcomes and, legal approach. But there's a lot of different perspectives. So I absolutely would love to see at least one member of the Salt Lake City Police Department participating with this commission. I do think it would be a potential conflict of interest to put them in a voting position, but their perspective, I think, would be absolutely critical.
Thank you both, commissioners, for your thoughts on that. So let me suggest this: if we get a consensus that it would be acceptable to have one or more Salt Lake City police officers on the commission, we can reach out to the chief and get his thoughts, whether he has some folks, and I'm sure he's already said he has some officers who are willing to do that. And I don't necessarily mean just command staff. I think it would be important to have some line officers on this commission to get a real view of what's going on the street. So if can we get a consensus? Is there a show of hands or a yay?
May I intersect one more point?
Sure.
Would these officers be doing this voluntarily, or would they be being paid to do this? I think that's also a concern of the public.
That's a conversation I'd have to ask with the chief. I don't know. But good question. Yes.
I'm up for it.
Great, Commissioner Khalil.
I do have a question, I guess, on the difference of bringing in someone from law enforcement to be part of the commission versus what we've been doing, where we've had different people from law enforcement come in and present to us and give us a different perspective. So I guess I'm kind of not sure like what would be the difference between bringing somebody in to be part of the commission rather than just having different representatives from law enforcement present or come in to present a perspective on whatever we're discussing.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I guess what I have seen is kind of a one-shot deal. The head of the SROs come in and give you the overview of that. The LT who's in charge of training comes in and gives you the big overview of training, as opposed to they're hearing and sitting in on deliberations for policy change recommendations. And so that's a much different, I think, engagement than they come in and present to you. But they're hearing the deliberations and informing on some level their perspective of what those recommendations may be.
I also think that it could go a longer way towards establishment of deeper trust and relationships for someone to be participating on a recurring basis as opposed to a rotating one time.
Right. Does that answer your question, Commissioner?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Any other, Commissioner Shiflett?
Yeah, I'm just curious, are there any qualifications or expectations that we have of this person who will be on the commission? Anything that, I guess, what are we looking for them, or what will we expect from them as a commission, sitting on the commission?
Well, that's a great question. And I can only offer my thoughts. I'd certainly love to hear the rest of yours. I would suggest in the conversation with the chief that it would be made very clear, and I'm sure he would already know this, that he wouldn't recommend somebody who has already had issues with various communities in Salt Lake City. Someone who maybe has the respect or trust of communities of color in the city. So, I mean, I think that's the prerequisite. Somebody doesn't have a history of, violations of policy, those kinds of things. But I'm certainly open to your thoughts and questions on that.
One other question that I'd like to just raise is there is a cadet program in the Salt Lake City Police Department. Would that be the same thing if we use one of those persons?
I would suggest that's a very different different product, if you will, than somebody who's been on the street for 5-10 years versus a cadet, somebody in the cadet program.
Okay. All right.
And some of those that are cadets right now in that program are actually in the youth subcommittee as well.
Thank you. Okay. So back to the question. Is there a consensus that we reach out to the chief to see if he has thoughts on officers who would be able to sit as non-voting members on the commission on a regular basis to attend subcommittee meetings as well as the full commission meetings as appropriate, given Commissioner Shiflett's questions and concerns about some of that criteria for who they would be. All in favor?
Aye. This is Darlene.
Okay.
I would be in favor if the person is as a volunteer.
Correct, yes. Sir. As well, you mean volunteer as opposed to it's their paid time?
Opposed to paid time.
Okay. I will
like the rest of us.
Right. I will ensure that is the conversation. Thank you.
That's my preference too, Dante. I really would prefer that.
Okay. Excellent.
So just a quick clarification.
Yes,
are we voting whether or not we want it to be a youth member or a law enforcement member?
I think they're two separate things because the law enforcement is not going to be a voting member where the other
the youth
position
would
will
be.
be voting.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So law enforcement first, then we'll fill the other position. How's that? Thank you. Okay. Any nays to us reaching out to the chief? Okay. Thank you. We will reach out to the chief, let you know what we hear. We can.
Dante, can I just say, I think there may be an issue with asking officers to volunteer for their employer. So I just want to throw out to this group that there's a possibility that it would run against the Fair Labor Standards Act to ask an officer to volunteer their time to be a part of a commission, which is so closely related to their work. So I just in case it comes back that they have to be paid, I didn't want that to be an issue or a trust issue. That's just, if everyone can just keep that in mind, if that's the outcome.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. So we're good.
I just want to be clear. You guys ain't getting paid? I'm getting paid big bucks. No, just go ahead.
Okay. Before I move on, I want to make sure everyone knows that it is now exactly 6 o'clock. And so if we move into the next component, which I think is important about filling the position and also having a conversation on the listening sessions, we're going to go past 6 o'clock. So understanding that some folks may have to drop off, but I think it's important that we go into those next at least 2 components of the agenda. Any objections to that? Great, thank you. The commissioner, so back to who can, which is what started the conversation about LEOs on law enforcement officers on the full commission anyway. So now there's been a conversation or thought on a youth commissioner filling that role, on going back to the matrix and seeing if there was someone who was on a wait list to be on the commission. And I think those were the 2. Was there another thought on filling the empty commission seat?
I think there are enough of us old people on this commission. I think we need another young one. That's my personal thought. And I think any other perspective we know enough people in the community to be able to get that perspective and to invite them to our subcommittee meetings.
Thank you, Commissioner.
And I would
I agree with
that
that.
we invite a youth person to fill the slot. My motion is that we would invite a youth to be the person to fill that slot, have 3 youths.
Okay, we can do Robert's Rules of Order. So there's a motion on the floor. Is there a second to the motion?
I will second that motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Eldridge. It's been properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? Okay, so let's call the motion. I'm not going to do a roll call vote. So all those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those
Aye.
opposed? Thank you. All those opposed? See how easy that was? Nicely done, commissioners. So we now have another youth commissioner who will be a full-fledged voting member of the commission. And as I understand it, the youth committee does that on a revolving basis. So there's no set youth commissioner, but they do it on a revolving basis. Is that a correct statement, Commissioner Powell?
Yes, that's an accurate statement. We're currently to piggyback one more time, make sure you get that list into us so we can reach out to all the youth subcommittee participants.
Thank you. So nicely done. So moving to the next agenda item is the listening sessions, which I think is hugely important for the residents of Salt Lake City and as you represent each of your communities. So Larry, I'll let you take it away.
Appreciate it, Dante. I'm sharing my screen here briefly, folks, because I wanted to, as I briefly talk with you about listening sessions, share with you a couple of things that are happening in some other communities around the country as it relates to sort of adapting engagement and listening of the public to our current circumstances. Obviously, the kind of traditional forms of public engagement of assembling people in person is a little bit challenging. I want to first just mention that it might be of interest to just observe a televised community conversation that I'm doing tomorrow night for the city of Denver. It's on an entirely different subject, but the idea is that this particular event will showcase a way for us to leverage municipal television as well as web streaming, telephone, text messaging, and social media to get a large audience that's often consisting of a broader cross-section of the community to be able to participate. So I've got the link posted up on the top of the screen, but I'll also send this to you all via email. I was told to make it bigger for some folks, so I shall. Again, this is tomorrow, Thursday evening, October 22nd at 5:30 Mountain Time, and it'll stream on both Mayor Hancock's Facebook, the City County Facebook page, and the Denver 8 municipal channel. So you're welcome to just observe that and see if it might be something that would be of interest to you all to incorporate into your approach to public engagement. Separately from that, I wanted to draw your attention to what we call in my world asynchronous engagement. So what I mean by that is that the televised meeting tomorrow night is live, is synchronous. It means that in order to participate, you would need to tune in and call in at a particular point in time. A site like this, which comes from Austin, Texas, is meant for people to participate at any time that they can over a multi-week, sometimes multi-month period. And as you can see, this is a forum that is dedicated to a topic that is similar, not identical, but similar to some of what the commission is taking up. The web address is speakupaustin.org. And what's interesting about this is that it gives the public a variety of different ways to engage. So you see here some RSVP opportunities for virtual meetings. You see a way to download a discussion guide or a community conversation kit to host with your own group. So that could be something of use to this commission. You could also take a what they call a listening session for one, kind of a survey by another name. And the thing that's always captivated me is the opportunity to participate in a threaded discussion, because what that does is allow neighbors to really exchange viewpoints one with the other, with the presence of a moderator or a facilitator who is helping to make sure the conversation stays on task and conforms to conversation guidelines. So again, this is a way to enable more of the community to be part of the conversation, particularly those who have less time to spare to attend meetings, even if they're virtual, but who have particular stories to tell or perspectives that would be valuable. And as you can see here, you're starting to see some reactions to other people's comments. And so it can start to help illustrate where there might be community consensus over the course of this. The last thing I'll just share as a interesting practice is the leveraging of just basic text messaging as a way to collect input. I know that it's something we may just view as a medium to say, hey, I'll be there in a minute, or quick little updates. But obviously text messaging is a very important medium. For many people, there are statistics that say that upwards of 90% of all Americans have text messaging, use it on a regular basis. And so the idea here is that we could create a means for someone to send a text message to a keyword and then share their thoughts via text message. And that's helpful for folks who may have limited internet access, or for whom the kind of high-speed internet you need to be on a call like this is a little hard to come by, as we know is still the case in lots of the country, and certainly in Salt Lake. So those are just a couple of practices that that I have either been directly part of or have seen work well. And I wanted to just take a moment to ask you all if there are particular ways in which you would like our team to consider orchestrating listening to the community. So number one, kind of, are there particular strategies you'd like us to consider? And then number two, how might the timing for this look? One idea would be to leverage the commission's own meeting time slots for listening sessions throughout, say, November and December. But another option could be to do them as meetings at different times and places, or different circumstances, settings, and so on. So I'd like to, Dante, with your permission, just give the commissioners the floor and collect some ideas.
I think the first thing is that we'd be interested in two goals being reached. One, the commission would be able to gather information. And secondly, we'd be able to share information with the larger community as well. So I think those are the two primary goals that we are interested in trying to reach. And whichever of those three, or if you have more ways, work best to achieve those two goals, I think that's what we are interested in. Other commissioners,
One thing that I didn't mention that I'd like to mention, because this came up in several interviews, is that it's definitely considered best practice to work in tandem with community organizations to facilitate engagement, to not have it all come from Salt Lake City or to come from a consulting firm, for example. So we would certainly, as part of this listening strategy, be trying to work directly with organizations that either you all are members of or affiliated with or just aware of, who could either help disseminate opportunities to engage, online, or could co-host events, or could in other ways help us to connect with the populations that we're trying to connect with. So that may go without saying, but I just wanted to throw that in.
And I think it's important to recognize that several of the ways that Larry describes don't need internet. So the goal is to reach as many communities as possible. Internet access is not a necessity, but how do we best hear from the members of all the communities that reside in Salt Lake City?
And I should have said this before, but the Denver broadcast will be simulcast in Spanish, and we have the ability to have at least one, if not more, languages utilized for a simulcast, or perhaps doing it entirely in a second language other than English. And I certainly think that's important.
The reason I'm not saying anything, which is shocking, is I feel that y'all are the ones that would have the experience of having these multiple ways. I like that text thing that you mentioned. My question is then who actually collects that information and organizes and disseminates it back to us and then to the community. But yeah, for me, I think y'all would, for me, you guys would be the ones that would maybe provide these options, and then we could say A, B, C, or D or something like that.
Thank you.
And yeah, I appreciate that. I certainly intended to have this be our first chat about it and then produce something more of a concrete strategy, but I didn't want to go too far without input from you all. Just in quick response to your question, I think our team would certainly take responsibility for, compilation, collection of all the input received and reporting it back to the commission and to the community.
Any suggestions on timing, as Larry suggested? Is this best on the weekend, best on the evening? Could we use a commission time, a full commission meeting to do one of the listening sessions? Any particular thoughts or suggestions on kind of rollout?
I certainly think that the evening would be the best time to do it. If we are expecting people from the community to participate. And so evening, I think, would be the better time to do that.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Commissioner Powell, do you have any feeling about what kind of setting or timing would be most effective at getting youth to participate?
I know the evenings are typically the most available time for most of us to meet. Some of us do have work schedules, but not all that different from many of you. So we'll go with the consensus of the main commission.
Thanks.
Can I ask the goal of the listening session? I certainly want as much access and input as possible. I completely support accessibility, for most people to have opportunities to provide comment. But how will the listening sessions differ from the public comment period in these meetings? And could somebody provide a perspective on that?
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. I'm sure others of my colleagues could contribute to that. What's interesting about public comment that I think a lot of us take for granted is that it is a pressure cooker to speak during public comment. You are speaking to a large audience. I mean, an audience of people, watching the meeting, but you're also sort of preparing a speech, and you're sort of taking a podium. And as I have experienced city government over, probably 13 years now, you notice that there's a very narrow cross-section of the public that's willing to partake of that opportunity. And pre-COVID, I think the reasons could include the inconvenience of having to go to City Hall and wait hours to speak for a few minutes. But I also just think that those of us who are extroverted and comfortable speaking in public take it for granted that a lot of people, even who are extroverted, much less introverted, simply would not be. To sort of be called up to know that there's a buzzer waiting for them, to stop them from talking past a certain point, and to have to formulate their ideas into a speech. It's natural for some and very unnatural for others. So I think that in essence, what we're trying to do is create a buffet of options for the public to be able to partake of, so that if they're more comfortable, typing and being a little bit more anonymous, and doing it at their own convenience, they have that option. If they want to engage more directly in a live give and take, we'll give them that as well. But the goals of these other tools is also to make it conversational, and I think the public comment period is very much public to you and not as much of a conversational opportunity. So it's meant to diversify that engagement.
And I think the messaging also is different in terms of what exactly we want to hear from communities, which is tell us your experience. Very different than have a conversation with a commission. And so I think those experiences and that anecdotal commentary, similar to many of the stories that we heard in our one-on-ones from commissioners, can be very powerful in really recognizing where some of the focus of the work needs to be.
I'll just say in closing that my intention would be to, and I certainly would consult with Siobhan, Josh, and Dante and the staff, but would be to disseminate some materials to you all for review. I don't know whether we necessarily will need to wait until our next commission meeting to sort of formally adopt it. It might be something we can accomplish in the interim. If anyone has any particular desire to be part of this, either from a design standpoint or an execution standpoint, please feel free to reach out to me through Coletta, Cindy Lou, Jesse, the staff. I can certainly give my email address as well, but I'll leave it to the staff to handle that, because there's kind of a good single point of contact. But if anybody would like to be particularly involved, I would welcome it. I'm sure the team would. And I know we'll be calling upon you all to help us, disseminate opportunities for engagement as well. Dante, that's all I had for now.
Great, thank you, because you're next up as well. The next component, and I think we'll be done by 6:30 if you allow me to facilitate into this next agenda item, which is about public engagement as it relates to media, social media opportunities. How is the commission telling its story? Where is the commission telling its story? And what is that engagement, that social media and or just media in general process that is happening or can be happening in the near future? So Larry?
Thanks, Dante. Well, I see Commissioner Salazar Hall. I don't know if she's still able to be with us, but my understanding from a media standpoint is that there are, I think, 2 or 3 commissioners who are part of the core team who are in a position to be spokespeople for the commission on behalf of the media. That's important and that's very useful. I think, though, that there are 2 other things to explore. One is not just a role of reacting to queries from the media or to incidents that may arise where the media wants the commission's feedback, but a proactive approach to engagement with the media. And then the second thing in the same vein is a proactive approach to social media. I don't have any idea whether members of the community are tweeting about your work or about this subject or posting to Facebook or Instagram and so forth. But I do think that it would be ideal to find a way to develop some sort of consistent pattern as it relates to our use of social media. By our, I mean the commissions, and to determine how decisions might get made about, who is authorized to post, say, on the commission's behalf. Obviously, you all may have social media accounts of your own and your First Amendment rights, but I think when it comes to speaking for the commission and giving people an opportunity to, like your page, for example, or follow you on Twitter or Instagram, that calls for a little bit of a different set of protocols. So, Dante, I might need your help with kind of the right framing question here. I think it's primarily, what do commissioners have in the way of ideas for either proactively engaging the media or proactive use of social media on the commission's behalf? I think that's what we're asking.
And I'll ask city staff, what exists currently as a means, if anything, of social media besides the city's website to tell the story of the commission?
I'd ask Lindsay, who's here from the mayor's office, if she wants to address that. I don't know of anything outside of the existing website right now.
Okay, thank you. So do individual commissioners, I don't tweet, I don't have Instagram, so I don't know anything about the platform or how it works, but do individual commissioners, are you using either of those platforms to talk about the work of the commission?
No.
No.
I think it could be useful. There's a lot of actively engaging a lot of young activists in the community are actively using those platforms to spread messages and news and media. So I think having an official page for this commission would be beneficial, and directly doing what a lot of people are asking is to be transparent. I think this is where the transparent work is going on at.
Thank you.
I hope this doesn't seem like a leading question or putting anything into anybody's mouth, but I think that in order to ensure that our work in this space is supported by everyone, it would make sense to me that the focus for posting be on information, not commission members taking a position on something. At least at this point, there is no kind of official position on much other than what subcommittees should be, but that the posts would be, here's what we're talking about, here's what we're examining, here's what we're thinking about, here's when we're meeting, do you have ideas about this, queries to the public. So I guess I just want to make sure that kind of engagement is what you all are thinking is okay for social.
I think that's very inviting, and it'll get people to come to our meetings and listen or comment. I'm just not a social media guru. I have to leave that up to you, Mr. Powell.
Yes, our guru.
IT, whatever you call it, tweeting and all that good stuff.
Okay. Well, maybe we can then put a pause on this, but as the Langdon group maybe reaches out and has conversations amongst ourselves about maybe best processes for moving forward with the idea of social media and media in general, and can come back with some thoughts to the commission meetings in a couple of weeks. Larry, does that sound like a reasonable effort?
Very much so.
Okay, great, thank you. So,
can I just put one comment in?
Yes, ma'am. Please, Commissioner.
I obviously do use social media, especially for our work and everything. One of the reasons that I did not use social media for this is I think the topic that we have at hand also creates some kind of the idea of association and kind of when you're a community activist, you have to align yourself carefully. Not having enough, this being a new commission and not having enough information as to what the commission would do and the heated sentiments, also creates the security question for the members as well. So that's my personal reason for not have, included myself in any public sort of stuff around this. I'm not sure if everybody else feels the same way, but I think kind of the security and authenticity is an issue.
Thank you. Good points. Thank you, ma'am. Okay.
In my case, like Dante, I don't do any of that social media. So I'll let the young people talk about it.
Reverend, I would dare say you do a lot of social media, but it doesn't necessarily show up on a screen.
Thank you.
Exactly. So I'm going to be right on time, or maybe give you back a couple of minutes, even though it's after 6. And suggest to you this, as we move into the first subcommittee meetings next week, come with issues that you want to address. I don't think there's any expectation you're going to write down a bunch of policies and walk onto the call with, these are the policies we want to talk about. But what are those issues, or what are the questions that you need answered that we haven't gotten answered yet from the chief, from who's heading the training department, from SROs, from whatever that might be? Are there particular questions that you would like answered, and or maybe having them come to present to the subcommittee in order to then move forward about getting deeper into the idea of recommendations and policy evaluation and or budget issues? So that's what I would suggest as you come to those subcommittee meetings. Other folks leading those subcommittee, thoughts on expectations or desires for the next week, the first meeting?
I have a question. Did you say something about presenting?
No.
Okay. All right.
Only in the terms of come with your thoughts on particular issues you would like to address. There's no, certainly not in the training subcommittee, is there any expectation of a presentation?
Okay. If we had a community member that did want to speak to an issue, how would that work in our subcommittee?
I would bring that up.
Sorry, an organization, I should say.
Yeah, I would bring that up with the subcommittee as one of your ideas in this initial meeting, and let that play out in discussion, and we decide within the subcommittee when and if that's needed, appropriate, etc.
Thank you.
Great question. Other thoughts or questions about the subcommittee meeting next week? So again, if you've selected several, pick the one you want to go to next Wednesday. Or if there's 2 that you can attend, please do so. And we look forward to our first real meeting of getting into maybe some more meat and some concrete components of doing this work. So if there's no other thoughts or questions, Reverend, I'll turn it back to you, sir, if you want to offer final thoughts and closing out.
Thank you, Dante. Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Siobhan. Thank you to the Langland Group for leading us through the meeting tonight. And thank you to all of the commissioners. One other item that we need to consider is there a need for a closed session to be held tonight? Any members of the commission know of any reason why we need a closed session? Hearing none, is there a motion then to adjourn, and others of you who have other meetings can get to those? This meeting stand adjourned.
All right.
Thank you all.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.